6.1 is going to have us define a class which is going to actually ask the user for 10 numbers, compute the average, store them in an array, and then revisit that array, iterates over that array to determine how many of those numbers were actually bigger than the average. So we are going to take it as usual one step at a time. Let's first start by defining the data we need to work on. So we need to store an array of numbers. Let's call it numbers. We'll define it as an array of double. So this is the declaration part, and now I'm going to create, in the same one step, this array of 10 doubles. We are going to have to actually ask 10 numbers from the user. So this is going to be a counter-controlled repetition, a counter-control loop. I'm going to start with an index I at 0. As long as I is lesser than, and I could use 10 here, the only thing is that I write 10 here, I write 10 here, so if I want to ever change this, I would have to modify multiple occurrence of the number 10 in my code. Instead, I'm going to just take the length of my array, numbers.length, and then I'm going to increment my index. Inside this for loop, oops, let's make some room here. Inside this for loop, what I'm going to have to do is ask the user to enter a number. So I'm going to require a scanner. So I go back up at the beginning of my main, and I'm going to declare a scanner s equal new scanner system.in. So that would take care of initializing my scanner. And inside the loop, I'm going to read the next double which is available from that scanner. Where do I store it? Well, I'm going to store it in that array numbers at index I. So I'm filling progressively from index 0 to index 9. I'm filling all of the slots in my array of doubles. I could stop here. Since this is a relatively simple exercise, I'm going now to add something here which is going to take care of computing the sum of those numbers. Remember that we want to be able to compute the average. So if we need the average, we need also the sum. So I'm going to declare variable sum, initialize it to 0, so that once I'm out of this array, I can compute the average. So I'm going to have variable average, and I'm going to compute the average by simply dividing the sum by, and once again, my first reflex was to use the number of integers we have, but let's use numbers.length, okay, which is going to carry exactly the same information. No need to convert it into a double, since sum is already a double. The result of this expression will be a double. So this is going to be the first step of our program. Okay, I have the average value, and I can do a system.out.println, println average equal, and I'm going to display here the content of my variable average. Okay, so we are at one point of our development where we can save. Go to the Conqueror window, compile this program. We have a little problem, line 7, cannot find symbol scanner. Well, it's simply because I forgot to actually import it. So I'm going to fix that right now. java.util.scanner is now imported. I'm saving. Switching back to my Conqueror window, I compile. This time it's working. And I'm going to execute. So there's no prompt, so I'm just going to enter number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Average is 5.5. And I can go back to my code. I have this first step of my code written. Okay, the next step is going to consist in, now that we have the average, try to determine how many of those entries in the array are above average. So to do so, I'm going to need a counter again. So let's call it count simply. And I'm starting with the assumption that 0 elements of my array are above average, which is false of course, but we'll adjust that as we progress. Second thing, I need a counter control loop to go once again over all the values of this array. So int I equals 0, I is lesser than numbers.length, I++. So watch out, you need to start two remarks about this code. You need to start at 0, okay, since it's an array, it's indexed at 0. And you will realize here that the integer variable here is valid only inside the body of this for loop. Therefore, when we declare another integer variable I, it's valid inside this loop, and both of them do not overlap. We cannot use any of them outside of their respective for loop. So make sure to ask a question in the forum or in class or by email if you have any problem with this little remark that I just threw in. So what do we do for each element of the array? Well, if this particular element at index I is greater than average, then we are going to increment our counter. If not, well, we do nothing. We just move on to the next element of the array. This will allow us println at the end of our loop to say there are count numbers above average. Let's save this program. Switch back to Conqueror and compile. Syntax is okay. Let's run and test it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm using the same data than before. The average is 5.5, and there are exactly 5 numbers above average, which are going to be 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, of course. So here's the code again, and we are done with this exercise.